Triceratops, Christian Galloway, friend from
Yeah.
high school. So we're gonna go into, and I don't know if you've heard any of the episodes or been listening to a lot of them. It's been changing over time, but kind of the main format of it now is talking about education, then talking about passions and such, and then talking about kind of general events, current events, diversity, stuff like that. And I have some
Cool.
questions for you, and we'll see where it goes. So first thing
Okay.
is kind of like for you, since I know that we went to the same high school,
hmm
is one, what pushed you getting into that high school, because I don't think we've ever actually talked about that. And then
Yeah.
subsequently from high school to college, what
My path.
yeah, like the path you took to, because you also transferred college, from
Yeah.
Pace to St.
That
John.
that was a
So
process.
yeah, so I
hmm
want to go into what went behind those decisions and how
hmm
you ended up where you are right now.
Okay. Well, I'll start from middle school. I went to PSMS 219. That currently is a K through 8 school, so I
Okay.
actually didn't go to middle school. I've never had that transitional experience.
Okay.
Um, but while I was in 219, one of my teachers had just mentioned the specialized high school test, and I was like, okay, that sounds cool or whatever. I'm good at taking tests.
hmm
So I went and took the test, and as I was waiting for results, my dad had a friend who knew someone in St. Francis Prep. So my dad was like, go to St. Francis Prep. You already have it in. And by that point in my life, I was starting to try to prove myself to both of my parents.
hmm
So I neglected to go that route. And I told them, if I get into this high school, I'm going into this high school because
Right.
I made it in. Um, Results came back. I made it in. My dad was a bit upset because he was like, "You didn't take the N." And I said, "Well, here I am.
hmm
I am now in a specialized high school, basically all honors classes, et
hmm
cetera, et cetera." So I go to Queens High School for the Sciences, where we went to college. And while being there, it was kind of a wake-up call, but not entirely. I got my true wake-up call in college.
hmm
But it was kind of a wake-up call because I realized I had it easy. Not to say that QHSS didn't pamper us in the certain ways that they did, but I realized that I was really coasting by and my minimal amount of work wasn't going to keep pushing me forward. Like
hmm
test taking isn't the answer to life, you
hmm
know? So in doing so, I started trying to find my passion. I was interested in law, so I did an internship at a law firm. That was super cool, and I love to go back. But one, they didn't pay me, and
hmm
two, it opened my eyes to all of the background work,
hmm
like law and order and all that stuff. That's not what being a lawyer is. 90% of it. That's just the 10% in the courtroom and stuff.
Right. Right.
It's a lot of clerical work, and if you're not interested in that, then that's not the job for you.
hmm
Not to say that I still don't have an interest in law, but it's not something I see myself
hmm
doing in
Well,
my early
before
30s.
we get into before we this is I think this is a little bit more specific to the
Okay.
category of like internships and jobs post getting into college and being in college. So before we go
Yep.
into that, I just want to stay on track to from high school to college, and
Okay.
like
All
because
right. So,
there's a little thing I want to specify, is that you said you got in your first wake up call in high school. Um,
hmm
like how do you think that that wake up call kind of came to you?
it's really funny. It was in what class was it? I think it was bio
Okay.
at freshman year, and I was kind of like not paying attention in class as I did in middle school. It was easy, and took my first test, and the test came back, and I had got like I barely passed.
hmm
It was like a 67 or something. And not to say that that's bad, sometimes you just have bad test grades, but that was the first time I've ever actually received a bad grade.
hmm
And at that point, I realized I was a bit too cocky for my own good. So I was like, wow, I actually have to pay attention and learn.
hmm
I have to go to class and actually listen instead of socializing with friends. And that was the beginning. Not to say that I didn't still slack off in high school, but I became more aware of what I was doing and when I was doing it.
hmm
Like I still made bad decisions, but that's on my decision making, not on my actual knowledge of the situation, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. 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 That makes sense. Um, so when it came to coming out around senior year and all that stuff,
hmm
realistically, and I talk about this a lot on like a lot of the episodes that I've had so far, is that people at our age in high school, like we didn't know anything, man. When we were like, just on the rise, like going to college, the application
Hmm.
process, like our senior year was the first year that we had a guidance counselor to even talk about getting into college. What's her
Right.
name? Miss Minkowski, right?
Yep.
And
Hmm.
even at that, she didn't explain anything to the extent that it should have been explained. She barely discussed the loan process, the
Hmm.
amount of debt you'd be taking, where
Oh.
you should be applying, all the options you have, what you should be doing.
Hmm.
None of that's really discussed with high school students, and it's sad to say that there's no focus on that.
Hmm.
But for every single student, there's a different kind of push to where they want to end up going. Like there's people like Ivy who wanted to go to an Ivy League.
Right.
Yeah, no joke intended, but she always had
Famous
that
Ivy, and
drive.
she went to an Ivy League.
She came from a family and an upbringing that pushed her to go to that Ivy League. For me, it was like I wanted to get away from home. I wanted a dorm, and Stony Brook was the closest option for me, and it just made the most logistical sense. For
Right.
you, like what was the decision that got you to Pace?
Um, Pace was one of the schools that sent me the most mail.
Hmm.
I was really attracted by it being in the city. And as naive as it may sound, I wanted to experience the private school life. I know I ended up still being a commuter, so I didn't get the
Hmm.
full experience, but just being in a private school was enough for me. So that's how I ended up in Pace. I mean, along with no one else in our year going to Pace, that kind of made it interesting, was a new start.
Right. That
But
is
that
that is
was
really interesting. Because
hmm
coming to
that
Stony
that was
Brook,
pretty good.
I still see a lot of the people from high school. I think I mean every single year I think 10%, which is 10 people for our school out of the 100, end up at Stony Brook. I still see Cindy, I still see Steven, and I see a lot of these people from high school, and it's weird. Like it's like a past part of me in meeting new things. So I think having a new start is
Right.
is interesting.
Hmm.
So did you dorm your first semester at Pace?
I didn't. I didn't. I have yet to dorm, nor do I think that is an option anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I spent a lot of time on campus. I used to always go home really late. I don't think I left Manhattan most days until 10:30,
Wow, wow.
11 p.m. So like while I may not have dormed, I was definitely a part of campus life.
Mm-hmm.
Like my first set of friends had dorms.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
So
I
you're
was
just
always
like hanging out
getting
at their
checked
places.
in.
Right. Okay. So private like so you said you kind of wanted to get into it for like the private college experience, right? So to you, before and after actually being at the university and
Hmm.
quote unquote experience it, like what were your thoughts before and what were your thoughts after actually getting there?
Beforehand, I thought I was going to get a different type of educational experience because, and this stems from our high school. Our high school, in a sense, is like a private college where you do get a honed in type of education,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to public schools. Not to say public schools are bad, but it's more generalized. The thing that stuck out for me the most, however, that I did not take into account is that even when you go to a private school, that private school has a specialization.
Okay.
Now, I ended up becoming a psychology major.
Mm-hmm.
Pace University is not known for psychology.
Pace
They're known for
University is
business,
yeah.
mm,
They're known for business and law,
business
from what I
and
know.
performing arts. Yeah,
Okay,
business
performing
and
arts.
performing arts. And they basically short end everyone else. So I ended up getting a CUNY sort of education in a private school.
Okay.
Granted, they had a lot of events, plenty of internship opportunities and networking, because because of their alumni programs and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, when it comes down to the classes and everything, barely any difference.
Okay. Right. So you didn't really get that whole like you thought, being in a private school would really change, all the resources you've had or you would have and what you could do with the classes, whereas you didn't realize like the specialization and the specific oriented programs that they had would really change the direction you went in. And that's another
Yes.
thing because coming to Stony Brook, I ended up being a math major here, but the thing is when I chose coming into this school, I had no idea that this was a school that was good for math or STEM. Um,
Hmm.
a lucky coincidence, I ended up here, and it was Stony Brook's, a good school for that. But I think most high school kids, like, going to college is more of a decision on name, especially when it comes to family. Which is
Hmm.
another question I have is like, how much did your family impact like your decision to go to a private versus public, CUNY university?
My parents, well, okay, I'll say my father because my mother, going through college, my mother went through college and my father helped her, but he never went himself.
Hmm.
So my father will always have this vision for me to go to some private university, whatever it may be, because he is obsessed with names.
Hmm.
My mother, however, she's going, I'm still paying off my student loans. Please go to a CUNY.
Hmm.
Um, but I liked the idea of a name,
Hmm.
of paying for a name. For example, everyone is obsessed with NYU,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and things like that. So it had an impact in the sense of the direction of colleges I was going to look at because I did apply to a couple of CUNY schools,
Hmm.
but ultimately the private school seemed like the better choice for me, especially in the field that I was going to go to, because I wanted to make sure I had some sort of connection when I finally propelled myself out of college.
Right.
Because a lot of students these days are terrified of the economy and the job openings that they are potentially going to have to start fighting for.
Hmm.
So I figured if I went to a private school, it would help me in the long run. It would give me a little bit of a push, not a huge one, but enough to where I felt a bit more comfortable.
Comfortable in terms of like getting a position somewhere, like getting started.
Yeah, in terms of security.
Okay, okay, okay.
So yeah.
That I mean that makes a lot of sense, and I think that idea does hold true for a lot of universities. Again, like going back to this is like an example that I can give easily just because I go to this university. Stony Brook, though a great school, our networking capabilities are very, very weak.
Hmm.
Compare that to a private university, or Ivy League university. We're not going to have the same Fortune 500 companies, the same just like big names out there that are recruiting from our campus. No one
Right.
comes to Stony Brook. It's like, oh, like we're gonna come consistently every year, and we want students from this university because we know what you have. Um, like when I go to the job fair, it's like small companies that are for like sales positions, and
Right.
it's sad to see that. But I can understand the idea that going to a big private name university would give you more opportunities in that way. But that doesn't always
It's
hold
a bit
true.
unfair. It's a bit unfair too because I also noticed while attending PACE at these job fairs there were big companies, yes, but
Hmm.
even the smaller companies were trying to get their foot in. They didn't come as often, but they still showed up because they knew how powerful the networking was at these universities.
Hmm.
So even the smaller companies were trying to fight for these private schools, leaving the CUNYs and these other schools out.
Hmm. Do you see that difference in the fact that you go to St. John's now versus Pace, like the kind of the amount of people that come for recruiting on campus?
Okay, so they're both private schools, but PACE is
It's
more private, I guess you could say.
it's a larger university in general in terms of like population and funding, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
definitely. I don't, I checked the statistic. I don't know how true it is now, but
Hmm.
when I was attending PACE, or at least when I started in 2014, PACE had the number one largest alumni network in the United States in
Really?
terms of universities.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, coming to St. John's, it has died down a lot, but there is still a presence.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. The next question would be the difference in the costs, because
Hmm.
again, private universities are extremely, extremely expensive. Kids from
Hmm.
high school graduating, going to college, have no idea how much money, whatever debt they're going in is. I like how
Hmm.
your eyes just widen
Oh,
there. Like, yeah, yeah, that it hits you. It hits you.
every semester it's something else.
Yeah, man, and I want to go into how bad that decision. I don't know if like the full extent, but I'm assuming it
Hmm.
wasn't great. Going to that
Oh,
private university was.
I'll tell you all the dirty details. Okay, so firstly, they tell you about these unsubsidized and subsidized loans. Now you're familiar with
Yeah,
these
yeah.
because you also go to a CUNY. What they don't tell you is that after you get those done, and even after you get your scholarships, you're still paying out of pocket.
Hmm.
So while you may only have to worry about dorming because you chose a dorm, it's not mandatory. I'm a commuter and I'm still paying out of pocket with my scholarship and my
Right,
loans from
right.
the government. So it's just a hassle. And sometimes I will think to myself while I'm in class or if I'm writing an essay or something, I'm like, was it really worth it?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Because this is something you may not know because we haven't spoken in a while, but I'm technically a junior right now. I'm supposed to be a senior like you,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm technically a junior. I had to drop out of school for a semester
Okay.
when I was in the process of transferring from Pace to St. John's.
Mm-hmm.
They came up with these fees that prevented me from even obtaining my official transcript, which forced me to skip a semester. And then, along with skipping a semester and transferring credits and everything, I ended up falling behind.
Right.
Not to say that I have a true issue with it. I came to terms as long as I graduate, it really doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But the money alone has such an impact on the student's life. And you may think, oh, that's the parent's concern or that can be dealt with, you'll take out loans or whatever, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really not.
It's not that
It
easy.
it stresses me out so much.
Yeah, without a
And,
doubt,
and,
man.
and as someone who has dealt with stress and been able to handle stress, it's not fun. And if I can give any advice to anyone in terms of picking your college, yes, private schools are awesome, but make sure you're not paying too much out of pocket because ultimately, though that networking and everything is not worth it.
Right.
It's better to
Right.
have money in your pocket than to know one big name who may or may not help you in a
Mm-hmm.
couple years' time.
It's no matter where you go or what you do, there's no guarantee. It doesn't matter even if you do amazing. There's a chance, no, not a good chance, but there's a chance that you'll
Mhm.
get your degree, you have done well, everything kind of worked out, but you still don't end up at the position you thought you were going to end up at. There's no promises, there's no guarantees. You're in a kind of machine that is, and this is the best way I like putting it now is colleges have become a business.
Definitely.
When you go to a lot of these universities, like they're taking your money and the outcome doesn't matter for the university. They're not getting
Mhm.
anything really out of you doing well after graduating. It doesn't matter to them.
Aside from a couple of numbers to take more money.
Yeah, yeah. Colleges like boasting about those who come back, the alumni who donate, but that's a very minority, minute population that actually ends up that accomplished, capable enough to come back and donate that money.
Right.
Um, but yeah, for the whole idea of debt, I want to go into like the actual difference in the numbers when it comes to going to Pace versus going to the St. John's and like
Mm-hmm.
how big that deterrence was. Um,
So I will say, just from a net value off the top of my head, because I would have to pull up my tuition bill and everything. From what I know, I am already paying about 7,000 less
a semester or
uh,
a
a year,
year? Okay,
like
okay,
cumulatively,
okay.
7,000 less. And I mean, that may not sound like a lot, but
Oh, that's a
it,
lot, man. That's a lot. There's
yeah.
a one semester that always stands out to me, and this is the one that really made me understand the value of money. Was at my junior year of college. My
Mhm.
parents, our financial aid went down a little bit because we were moving, and they were a little less capable also financially. So
Mhm.
at this point, I had some money saved up. So for the semester, I helped them out. For that one semester, helping the amount that they were paying on top of the loans that I was taking, which was approximately
Mhm.
like 2.53 grand, that was
Mhm.
all of my savings that I had for 3 years of working every summer. And like
Mhm.
after that money was like gone in like an instant, I was like, Jesus, like this is so like I worked like hundreds of hours to save that money. It's gone in a
Right.
second. Like you really understand like the physical
The
value, like the
scale, the
time trade off.
magnitude. Mhm.
So when did you actually transfer from Pace? Like when did that decision come
I
about?
transferred, let me see, I want to say my second semester of sophomore year.
Second semester, sophomore year. Okay.
Yeah.
So you did
So
2 years, took a gap year or a gap semester, and then you continued.
a gap semester, which
Okay.
ultimately put me back a year, but a gap
Okay.
semester.
Again, I was just the person I was just talking to. We had this conversation where it's like, it's very common now for a lot of undergraduates to the general average amount of time it takes was 5 years. Um,
Hmm.
I think more and more people are getting more accustomed to being okay with either changing majors, changing what they're doing, and getting geared more towards like what they want to do.
Hmm.
I think that's more important to a lot of people now, which is good. Like I think that's really important because you're better off
Yeah.
changing on a little bit earlier, down the line than later on where you're already done and you're like, oh, like I don't want this now. You know,
All that time was wasted.
yeah, yeah. Doing a 180 very early on, it's like, I made the decision to change. It may take longer, but I'll be happy with that decision later on.
Right.
So
Definitely.
when did you switch the majors? Or because
Um,
what were
I,
you were
I,
in law, so this is going into the internships and stuff.
okay. Okay. So, I did my internships back in high school, I think, sophomore year and junior year of high school.
Okay.
And at that point, I had decided that I was interested in law, but I did not want to pursue it as soon as I got out of college,
Hmm.
my late 20s, early 30s. At this point, I started looking for alternatives that could place me somewhere for the time being. And if I do decide to change completely, as well as propelling me into law if I ever become ready, that's when I stumbled upon psychology.
Hmm.
Psychology is one of those majors where it doesn't really matter what you do with it as long as you're working with people. So it is very safe,
Hmm.
and that was extremely appealing to me. Once I started taking psych classes, I actually started developing a passion and a love for it. But before then, it was strictly a strategic maneuver
Hmm.
based on what can I use if I get into law, and what can I do as a career if I choose not to do law. And psychology was the answer. I could open up my own practice. I could become a teacher. I could work for the police force.
Hmm.
So many different things. I could even do PR.
Right.
I can do some sort of like business related thing.
So instead of
Psych
looking
is
at it,
just
instead of look, sorry to cut you off. Instead of looking at it like, what can I get from this? You start looking at it as like, what like would I offer someone? Like, if someone was to want to hire someone, it's like I already have these skills because I wanted to do that. I wanted to learn it for myself, and I know all this information. So there's a good chance that this, X, Y, or Z company or firm or whatever it may be would want to hire me because I've already attained all of this information and knowledge. Okay, that
right.
makes that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm. And it kind of it made sense just from the way I grew up too, because my mother, she struggled through college. Granted, she has a career that isn't tremendously what's the competitive
Hmm.
because it's so small. She's a speech pathologist,
A what?
so there's not a speech pathologist.
What the hell is that?
Essentially, she
I'm sorry. I've
she
never in my life have I ever
no,
heard
it's fine, it's
that.
fine. Okay, so essentially, she studies the development and the learning of speech.
Okay.
So from when you're a child to when you're an adult,
Hmm.
and those who have learning disabilities or those who are impaired in some sort of way through their communications, she assists with that.
Oh, okay, okay.
So in the same way,
I've
mhm,
known of that position. I never knew it was called the speech pathologist. Okay, good
speech
to know.
pathologist,
Okay.
yes. So she does that, but I think she switched a couple of times in college. And my father, he says he's self-taught, and he truly is. But he just picks up jobs whenever they come to him. And his whole thing is how many people he knows, and that's how he gets forward in life. I wanted something where it was a combination of the two,
Hmm.
where it was still a field that was breaking in and not tremendously competitive, but also allowed me to network to a degree where I can pick up whatever comes to me.
Right. Okay. That makes that. I think that's more. It's a little less stressful, where it's
Hmm.
you're not just waiting for the next move. You kind of have your pieces, and like you're just. I don't know what's a good way to phrase this. Um, but you kind of have the moves more in front of you. Like you have the options rather than you're just trying to figure out the game itself.
Right. Not to say that you shouldn't hone in if you know what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like if you know you want to be, uh, take my mother for example. If you know you want to be a speech pathologist, go for it. You know, if you know you want to be a doctor, if you want to be some sort of health position, anything like that. If you have a specific, work towards it, and that work ethic will put you there.
Hmm.
But if you're someone like me who has just an interest in a lot of things and you don't know exactly where you want to be just yet, it is very safe and it's still beneficial
Hmm.
to both yourself and whoever it decides to hire you.
Right, right. It's a two-way street. It's not just
Yeah.
like it has to be give or take. That's a good
Hmm.
segue to I like the next section I like talking about is passions.
Okay.
So what you discussed was you kind of felt passionate about psychology, mental
Hmm.
development, working more with people. Um, so I want to focus on that, and then I also want to focus on. I know you did like photography for a little bit. I don't know how into it you got, how deep you went. I actually it's a couple episodes ago. I interviewed a friend of mine who's he's the operations manager at a upcoming a streetwear company.
Okay.
He got into photography and like it's like a love that he has, and he somehow made his side hustle, part of his hustle. So
That's cool. Yeah.
kind of want to go into those passions that you have.
Okay. So I'll start with psych. As you know, since we went to high school together and we've had quite a few classes, I love to talk and I like making friends. Uh, Probably a little too much for my own good, but I've always it's sort of a double-edged sword. I like making friends or I like tolerating people to an extent where even if they shouldn't be, I try to attempt to anyway.
Hmm.
And I think because of that, I had an interest in other people. So when I found out about psychology and studying people, how they work, the different types of moves that they'll make, not to say that psychology is a study that tells you how someone ticks, but it's more of we're creatures of habit, right? Us as humans are creatures of habit. And when you study psychology, you study those habits.
Hmm.
So you may not be able to pinpoint exactly what someone is going to do or what they're going to say, but you have a good idea of the path that they might land on, which could help you understand them.
You find the
And
trend.
yeah, that truly fascinated me. And I was like, wow, it's crazy. And it's really funny because there is this joke that you probably heard before. Psychologists can fix everyone's problems but their own.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, but I kind of did that in high school,
Hmm.
like without like not on purpose, and it just kind of fit for me. It made sense.
Right.
So I started studying. I actually took a psych class back in high school. I took the
The
college
college now.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I took the college now, and I took psych, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. So once I got into college, I had this really interesting experience that I just want to share in terms of my psych career. Because I took college now, when I went to PACE and got those credits transferred, they were like, we don't know exactly where to put you because all freshmen take intro to psych if you're going to be a psych major. So we don't know what to do. And I was like, listen, I don't want to take a class again that I don't have to take.
Hmm.
So I ultimately got put into a Psych 300 class, which
Freshman
is,
year.
yeah, in freshman year.
That's quite a
My
jump.
first my first semester in college was a 300 class in psych. I was surrounded by juniors, and it was intimidating to say the least. This was also around the time I come to find out that no one cares how old you are or what grade you are in college.
Yeah.
Everyone is the same playing
Yeah.
field. But it was intense. But because I got pushed so hard into it so quickly, I realized, or I got a glimpse of what was to come,
Hmm.
and that's when I truly discovered that psych was a passion of mine.
That click for you.
Yeah. And
Th-
in terms of photography,
I was gonna say that this is a little off topic, but I don't know if you've seen the show Mindhunters on Netflix. You would 100% love that show. Anyone that's listening to this, like watch that show. It's actually based on how the psychoanalytic department in the FBI came about. It's the
hmm
stories of like real serial killers and how the department started understanding the trends and the analytics behind psychological behavior and kind of getting in the mind of a criminal to figure out what they're going to do before they do it. It's a really interesting show. I think you would love it. I just wanted to just throw that out there.
Oh no, I'll definitely check it out. I appreciate it. Okay, so for photography, I always like taking pictures. It started because I was self-conscious
Hmm.
and I didn't like pictures being taken of me. So I was like, oh, I'll still be a part of this by taking the photos. Then people started praising me, and that's probably a mistake. I was like, oh, another thing I'm good at. Ah, amazing. So then that's when I started taking more and more photos. And then remember I started stealing our friend's camera,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I started working for our student government organization, taking
Hmm.
photos for the events, and people just kept praising me, and I was like, wow, I'm good at this. I should I should keep going. But it's always been a hobby. I never took it too seriously, and it's
Hmm.
funny because whenever I talk to photographers now, they go, "You treat photography like a serious hobby. You
Hmm.
don't treat it like a main focus." Not to say that you shouldn't major in photography in college or whatever, but the way to truly do it is to do your hustle, whatever it is that you're doing, and on all your downtime, you'll practice your photography, you'll get your name out there, you'll start networking, and from there you'll build a name for yourself and you can make the transition.
Right.
I really like the idea of that. Haven't done it. I
It
had a
takes it
friend.
takes time.
It does, and I also don't have. Okay, so people will ask me what my dream job is, and it's really funny. I just have this vision for myself where I'll go hiking, I'll take pictures of beautiful scenery and nature, and it will show up on someone's calendar in their living room.
Ooh.
Don't ask me why, but that is my dream job. Something about that, I feel it.
Why not?
Right?
Well, there's so many.
Yeah, no, it's
There's do you know? I don't know if you follow this Instagram chick, Sarah Underwood. She
the
literally
name sounds.
she literally, well, you probably know her. I'll send you a link or I'll DM it
Okay.
to you later. But she's always just in nature. She just works with photographers and she's just like hiking and taking photography. And it's just like like you see it and you're like, wow, like you get to experience this, but also it's like a career path for you. It's like it's cool,
Yeah.
you know.
So like that always interests me. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep taking pictures until one day maybe I'll make it there. But also at the same time, I truly just enjoy it as a hobby, and a part of me doesn't want to monetize it just because of what it means to me.
Hmm.
Not to say that I'm not above it. I will 100% monetize my work, but I'm just I don't have the current drive to do so. Like I had this friend who started an Instagram when I was at Pace, and he was like, "Oh, I'm getting into photography too. You help me out." So I was helping him with his technique and everything, and his Instagram page started blowing up. So I was like, "Yo, man, congrats or whatever." He was like, "You need to blow up yourself too," and I was like, "Yeah, I'll work on it." He said, "No, hashtag your photos, hashtag all your photos and that," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it." And I haven't hashtagged a single photo to this day. Why? I have no idea. I, 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 if you ask me why, I couldn't tell you. I haven't done it. I'm not against it. I would love to get more followers and more praise, please. But I don't know. It's truly just a hobby for me that I enjoy.
I mean, I feel the same way about, doing what I'm doing right now. It's like, I don't know if this will ever pan out and be anything, but like, I like the idea of being able to put out something that, people might enjoy,
I'll get
even if it
around
doesn't get
to it.
monetized.
I'll get around to it. Someone I had spoke to told me about this website. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I'm going to search for it again, where you can create your own things. Like you can create calendars, you can create books or whatever. And one of my photography projects, which had just ended recently, which is probably why people think I quit photography, but I took a photo a day for a whole year on Instagram.
It's a lot of photos.
If you go through my Instagram from December 18th of 2016 to December 18th of 2017, there was at least one photo. There were a couple of days where I posted multiple photos, but there was at least a photo a day. Partially so that I could find photos in my everyday mundane life. Because 9 out of 10 times when people post on Instagram or they take photos in general, it's for some big event
Hmm.
or something really pretty that day. I wanted to capture the beauty and every mundane day life,
Right.
you know? So I did.
A key. Yeah, sorry to cut you. I hate Skype. It's just so bad. At,
I talk too much. It's
no,
fine.
that's yeah. I think it's just the fact that there's a little bit of lag between what I say and how when it gets to you. One of the things one of my friends always says, and we have this conversation a lot, is that people on Instagram, and this is really important for like young, I think like college students, like seniors in high school, or like people not just seniors in high school, like upperclassmen in high school, people who are like really on social media and are heavy on that. It's like everything on social media is a highlight reel. There's a big part of those are the people that are really on it, and they're trying to make something out of it. Is all the pictures that they take, it's for the purpose of I want this to become something. It kind of takes, for some people, not all of them, for some it takes away the love aspect of it. Like I just want to do it to do it. The way you said, like you do it for the mundane, like I want to do it to get the everyday little things out, not just because I want to do photography so people come to my page.
I mean, I did try to make them look pretty, but the point was to find aesthetic in your day to day, the things you might overlook.
Right.
And it really pushed me. I literally got out of bed and I would just start looking around and I'll go, okay, what's going to be a picture for today? And I try not to take a picture of the same thing. So at some point, I just had to stop taking pictures in my own home, and I had to go outside, and then I had to stop taking pictures at Pace because I took so many pictures at Pace, and then it really pushed me to find photography everywhere. But it also did drain me in a good way because I did enjoy it, but I haven't posted on Instagram since.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I quit Instagram.
Been
I
busy.
needed a break.
Yeah, you do stuff. Okay.
Hmm.
Outside of school, so I want to talk a little bit about, more on kind of the experience you've gotten. I haven't
Okay.
been like completely up to date with everything you've been doing. I know you got a part-time job and all that. So like if you've had internship experience or anything of kind of that sort.
Hmm. Um, I haven't interned anywhere since high school,
Mm-hmm.
partially because as a college student, I need money.
Right.
So I can only network but so much before it hinders me. Um, but I actually didn't start working until last summer because I mean, I did tutoring here and there, but it was no official W-2,
Was
had to give me Social Security,
right,
anything like that.
right.
It was all off the books.
Yeah. Okay.
So this was like an actual job for me, and I kind of like it. It keeps me on a routine,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, it it gives me a sort of consistency because when I wasn't working, I had tons of free time. And when you have free time, you don't want to do any of the things you have to do.
Nothing at all. It's
So,
difficult to make yourself do work when you have
mm,
no work to do, really.
so now that I have work, now that I have an obligation, it puts me on a schedule where I'm in work mode or I'm in a mode to be out and about.
Hmm.
And then I start getting my homework done. I start doing the things I need to do. And it really helps out. It's good for me. It's hard to juggle or work in school, but it's good for me.
Yeah, it definitely it helps with scheduling. The
Mhm.
first job I had as a personal trainer, we were forced, not forced, but like we were told, no, I guess forced, but we had to use a Google Calendar, schedule all of our clients, schedule when we're at the gym, and it really teaches you how to maintain a schedule, how to be held accountable, how to kind of, you know, what's a good way to put this? Um, take a position of responsibility and be held liable by someone at a higher position who has the authority to fire you. Like that's a big thing that a lot of people need. It's a good
Hmm.
push because you're like, well, I need money. If I don't do my job, I don't get money.
Right.
I'm gonna keep working. I'm gonna keep working.
Exactly. I'm gonna be a good worker. People still don't understand that. Like I have a handful of coworkers that, and I question how are they still there.
Right,
But I mean, that goes with anywhere.
dude. Those
But no,
people,
it.
those people, the individuals, because I have a lot of coworkers that are like that too. The individuals who can't maintain their time and show up to jobs that are of, lesser category, like minimum wage jobs or jobs that are just like, part-time for seasonal workers. If you can't, make it to those jobs, you're in for a rude awakening,
Right, definitely. Definitely. I think more people need to work. Not to say that you have to go get a job, but summer youth is doing it justice.
Right.
Not like yeah, you'll have your teenagers who are like, "Oh, I'm just doing it to get money or whatever," but it does put them in situations that make them uncomfortable. They are reprimanded for not doing something when their parents might not do that. They are expected to be present and to attend and to cooperate with different types of people when their school may not emphasize that. And it really sets you up for life because life ultimately is all about how you deal with people and how well you deal with yourself when you don't like those people.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I
Oh
mean,
man.
I was actually talking to a coworker today. We were talking about just like general positions at like working at any firm. At the end of the
Hmm.
day, an economy is the conglomerate of a bunch of people. You know what I mean? The entire system only functions because there's positions and jobs or kind of roles that need to be fulfilled, and those are all in cooperation with other positions, jobs, fields, and people. So if you can't work with those people, what are you gonna do?
Right.
Yeah, that's really important. All right, so I'm
That's
gonna.
another reason why I like psych. Just
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's psych is really interesting, and that's honestly that's something that is a pushing factor in why I started the podcast. Is I like talking to people because everyone has a story. Like it's really really interesting, and everyone has like a different reason why they do what they do.
right.
I always love that part. Okay, so the next section I want to get into, and you saw this coming, is um, this is a question that I think is actually really important. Speaking from a societal point of view, is the
Okay.
idea of being unable to objectify a man. Um,
Okay.
I think that this is. I think so. There's a lot of reason to debate, and the thing is, I have to tread lightly when I say anything in the subject matter because I'm always scared that someone on YouTube, someone when I put this on the internet, will take a section and just like screw me over and make it seem like I'm completely against something. So like I'm trying to make it clear that I'm all for equality, but when it comes to equality in terms of male and female, I think
Hmm.
it is one-sided, and there are a lot of arguments where, you don't look at it sensitively for the male perspective. Um,
Right.
so for you, the question is, and I did play a part in this, so I am apologetic for that. Um, you have, in my opinion, and you've discussed this at lengths before, been objectified uh, for your genitalia, and I think
Right.
that is something that's no one's gonna bring it up, no one's gonna want to talk about it, but at the same
Hmm.
time, like that's a possibility that people won't talk about. So do you think that that's like actually something that is possible?
No, you are 100% valid in your, how you're viewing it. Before I jump into the topic, though, I just want to give my 2 cents on why people might think that. And that's because people are so focused on what's at the forefront. And the forefront is that women get objectified more.
Hmm.
So a lot of times people equate exposure to importance, which isn't the case, but that is the general consensus. And because of that, people will neglect to talk about male sexuality and male objectification and things like that.
Hmm.
But to dive further into what you brought up, back in high school, um, I guess I'll tell the story very briefly. Back
I'll
in
try to
high
work
school,
around it and like not be
it's
abrupt, but
it's
yeah.
fine. It's fine. No, like ultimately you didn't do anything wrong. It was how I handled it and how I felt about it at the time. But okay, so back in high school, I had this girlfriend who was close friends with you, and she, like basically divulged a lot of information about me to you, which I was okay with because I also trusted you and we were best friends, but they weren't necessarily things I would tell you up front. One of those things was about the size of my genitalia. Um, So you being, a male high schooler is going, oh my God, that's amazing. I wish I had that. So then you tell our immediate circle of friends, because that is our immediate circle, and those are things you talk about in high school.
Right.
But from there, it blew up because we went to a very small high school, 400 kids total. Mind
Yeah.
you, there are only 4 grades in high school and in the US high school system. So virtually 100 kids a grade. So things spread around fast. And ultimately, the majority, if not all, of our graduating class graduated knowing my size. And at the time, that was not information I really wanted people to know about, especially about myself, because I wasn't fully accepting of myself at that point in my life. So it was kind of difficult for me. I would always shut it down. I would say, no, don't talk about that. Like, I wouldn't say, oh, it's not true,
Hmm.
because, like, it is true, and you kind of want to brag about it, but at the same time, you don't. So it was hard for me to maneuver, but it's something that happens. And to bring it to a broader scale, you'll have male models on like Hollister and stuff. Actually, ooh, here's an even better one. And I think this is relating to your topic. If it's not, stop me. But all of these cases about female teachers having relations with male students in high school, and everyone's immediate reaction is, "Oh, he wanted it. Why would he tell on her?"
Right.
Things like, and that's outrageous. You know, ultimately they're a minor. It's statutory rape regardless. But people have this view of males, of boys, of men, however you want to refer to them as these sort of sexual deviants. When one, females are just as bad, if not more. It's just not spoken about. And two, people should be allowed to explore themselves. So the limitations that are put onto that gender is very limiting. So when people come up to me and they go, "Oh, are you really that big?" or things like that, they expect me to boast about it.
Hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, can I see? Oh, you're lying." And that's another thing. People are, that is another thing. Guys feel inclined to lie about it because the media has sort of convinced people that that is the norm or that's the only thing that's acceptable. So it's truly difficult to navigate as being a victim of it. But it did help me. It did push me to learn myself more and to accept myself. But it's 100%, it exists. It
I,
exists.
I wanted to bring it up in this way because I really thought about it, and like I joke about it because like we're close friends,
Hmm.
and like this high school stuff like it's not no like serious foul
Right.
intent was meant. But then I really started thinking about it, and there's so much debate in current media in terms of equality, and I think a lot of the way that the debates are structured can end up being skewed to one side. And the thing is, I think it's for a lot of people, it's hard to believe that. And when I say that, they're like, "Oh, like you what? Like you're against women's rights." It's like no, like I just think that there's some topics that it's possible that it can be against men. That's a
Right.
possibility. So
Right.
I actually wanted to actually bring it up in a way where of importance.
I agree with you. And again, and I can't stress this enough because I had a recent conversation with one of my friends. Well, one of our friends actually, about it, or rather about men versus women in general.
Hmm.
There was this post that the post started off by saying racism is built in a structure of dominance. Therefore, you can't be racist to white people because they have the power, right? Now that's arguing semantics. We're not going to get into that. But the post also continued to say, sexism is built under a system of dominance. Therefore, you cannot be sexist to men. You can still be prejudiced, you can still be discriminatory, but you can't flat out be sexist. And so we were talking about it, and one thing he failed to realize was that, okay, his argument is that you can be sexist to men, but it's not as important because women are being harassed 24/7. You hear about it all the time. Women are going missing, women are being raped, women are just being flat out harassed for just walking to work, right? And he failed to realize that, yes, that is at the forefront. That is something we need to address right away. But just because that is the hot topic doesn't mean it's the only topic or the most important topic. Men also get harassed. Men also experience sexual assault. And just because the frequency of conversation is shifted to one side doesn't mean that the other side isn't important. And I think that's going into what you're saying. You're just trying to bring up the other side, you know?
Exactly.
You're admitting that women do need help and that they do need to be protected, and it's very unfair the things that are happening to them. But we should also, as a people, understand that men are experiencing the same thing. Just because it's at a lesser degree doesn't make the crime any worse.
You need to understand the
You
whole
know?
truth.
Hmm.
You can't pick and choose what you want to know and what you want to claim to be the facts. The facts are, laid out there, and you have to take everything into consideration as a whole to really, get the big picture of what's going on. And as soon
Right.
as you start denying one side and only accepting the other, you're kind of skewing all of the information, and now it becomes this versus that versus everything in the middle.
Hmm.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I'm glad to have talk about that in a serious way. The last thing that I like asking for everyone that I have on the show is what your short term goals are.
Okay.
You're as of right now a junior at St. John's, pursuing psychology. So short term or long term, what you plan on doing. Maybe even with your photography passions, like in
Hmm.
upcoming months, maybe years, whatever you have planned out. Uh, you know,
Okay.
just to give a general idea of kind of what you're doing now.
Okay. So where I am currently, I'm gonna finish the psych bachelor's, and I'm most likely gonna go for my master's. Um, just as a backup because life is so difficult, I had to create a backup. I also took the firefighter exam, only the written portion so far, and I'm waiting for the results of that. If those come in well, I'm gonna go in for the physical. So a firefighter is a short-term solution if college doesn't pan out, strictly for financial reasons because I'm doing fine in college. So strictly for financial reasons, firefighter is the short term. Long term, hopefully I can continue to get my master's in psych. I will continue doing photography as a hobby. I'm gonna jump back on Instagram fairly soon. I'm itching to take photos again. And I've even taken a couple of photography classes just to keep myself in the mindset. But I'm really just trying to take things day by day. I don't have a true long term. I just have an end goal. And the end goal is to get the master's in psych, regardless of what I do with it, whether I end up going to law school, whether I open up my own firm for clinical psychology, or whatever I decide to do. Even with photography, even if I somehow make it big with that, I want to ultimately get the master's in psych.
Sounds like
And
a
from
sounds like a relatively like a not something that's like too kind of written in stone, but something that's like
Mhm.
it's an idea. It's just a general blueprint, general kind of something you can reach for.
I found it's better to have these sorts of goals because it doesn't limit you and how you go about them. It allows for more versatility, which in turn allows for better results. because if you're too rigid, um, you'll break easier, and your plan can break easier. So I think it's better to have sort of open-ended goals that still have a clear path. Like there is a desire for something. It's not just, oh, I want something just to want it. And it may not be for everyone, but for those people who their life is constantly changing, or if they're constantly changing, this is definitely the way to go. Because that way you can seamlessly go through your days without having to change your end goal.
Have a little bit less stress. Just take it one step at a time.
Right.
Yeah. The last person I just talked to, actually, he's starting his own little like company for shirts.
Hmm.
Like he has like a clothing wear going out, and he's a personal trainer. He worked at the gym that I used to work at, and the motto is "Build and Don't Stop." And
Hmm.
I actually really like that. It's a little cliche, but at the same time, it's a truth. You start somewhere, you
Right.
build it, you just keep working toward it, hammer at it, day by day.
Hmm.
Um,
It'll get done.
yeah. So again, thank you for being here. I
Thank you for
will, if
having
anything,
me.
I'll link your Instagram for your photography.
Okay.
Um, and if you have anything that you want to say, any last notes to anyone who listens to this, go for it.
Something someone said to me in relation to schoolwork, but I think this applies heavily throughout your life. If it's important enough, it'll get done. So don't worry about how it's going to happen. Just do what you're doing. And if it's important to you, it will eventually happen.
It's a good one. I like you.
Yeah,
You got a couple good quotes in this episode. Um,
appreciate it.
all right. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for anyone who listened to the episode, the podcast, the video. Um, you know, share, like, all that stuff if you enjoyed it. And I'll catch you guys on the next.